All right. We are in 1 Peter chapter 5. This is part 16, and we are going to be taking a look at what Peter has to say to elders. I've thought of a bunch of different ways to start this evening, and I think I'm going to just skip all of them and we'll dig straight in. Sometimes there are rabbit trails in my head that we don't go on. So, we're not going on this one. This begins the final exhortations that Peter is going to be making. So last week we kind of wrapped up a lot of the theological ideas and concepts, and this week we're going to kind of see his end of the book, his so what's, his now I've taught you, what are you going to do with it? This chapter 5, starts off with therefore. And what is the therefore? Well, it ties back to what just happened. I mean, that is what a therefore does. But why? What is it that he just got done talking about? In verses like 17.
Time for judgment.
The judgment's coming. So why is he now shifting to look at the elders? That kind of ought to get you thinking. Like, ooh. Now, in James chapter 3, James reminds them that they shouldn't have many of them become teachers because they will receive the stricter judgment. I think, and a lot of commentaries and such kind of back this up, that Peter is likely pulling from some of the Old Testament prophetic books like Ezekiel and Jeremiah, where when God sends his judgment, he often will address the leaders of his people before he necessarily deals with his own people. And even when he sends them sends judgment like on the city of Jerusalem and onto the temple, it's the elders of the people who are first in line. And he just got done saying, it is time for judgment to begin with the household of God. And if it begins with us first, what will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel? And then it seems fitting that he then continues on to address these elders. And so the leadership, those who are in charge of the church, need to be aware God's judgment is coming. Now, we talked about last week, this judgment is not necessarily like condemnation as much as evaluation, and it can be even correction. We discussed that fiery trial or fiery ordeal, and the fact that sometimes that is a purifying, sometimes that is a punishing concept. And so it seems that Peter is just really continuing that idea and beginning to give some of those practical so what's to his reader. So in the first question, I asked you, who is Peter addressing in verse 1? The elders among you. So what is an elder? Okay, overseer? But that's a different word. Okay. Older. This is one where a valid, reasonable question comes up. Is this referring to age, or is this referring to position?
Position.
And why? And why? I know the answer, but I'm trying to get you to think through and to figure out and to understand why is it, and what is it about this that tells us that? Linda?
Well, when I looked it up in Blue Letter Bible and looked it down to where they took this quote from,
Mm-hmm.
it was according to Blue Letter Bible anyway,
Yep.
it was those who preside over the assemblies, the churches.
Okay.
I also had those qualified by the work of the Holy Spirit.
Okay. So, in the New Testament, after Christ, the word elder is almost exclusively used of an office. I say almost because there are a few times when it refers to someone who is older, but most of the time it's referring to the office of an elder. In the time of Christ, so basically in the Gospels, it's used both ways to refer to those who are of greater age and to those who are in the position of an elder for the Jews, the Sanhedrin, the leadership. You go back into the Old Testament, and the term is used of those who are in charge. And so this idea is, though it refers to an age, it's almost always used in regards to a position of authority, whether that's an official office of the church or a position within society where the elders were the ones who sat at the gates and rendered judgment. They were the wise individuals who gave information and decisions to the next generation. And so it is something that's used of age, but it's being used here of the position, of the office of a elder. And you were holding up a piece of paper.
I just went and looked at
You,
First Timothy 3:1-7, Acts 1:5-9.
Yep.
just to get to the right definition.
same term is used there as well. Yes, ma'am.
So I only looked it up in the big old honkin' book, so we're gonna call it. And the only reference that was in that little section was what I referenced: older man, older woman,
Mhm.
older ones. So my question is if we're gonna look at the Greek,
Yep.
and we're gonna go straight to what it says, why do we not have something else besides G4245?
Because that's the word that's used is presbyteros, which is translated as elder, and it does refer, the strict definition is older person.
Okay,
Its usage also helps define that word, and that's why I walked through, when you see it in Scripture, after Christ, with, I think, one exception, it's dealing with the position within the church. 1 Timothy, Titus. When you see it during the time of Christ, it is almost always used in reference to that elder with that position of the Sanhedrin, the leadership of Israel in days gone by. So it is older, but societally, the term was used in reference to a position of authority, a person who was in charge.
so I turned it off.
Microphone didn't.
So the next question would be,
Mhm.
why is it that they've not necessarily put that in the written version? I understand it's in the electronic version, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of at the anti-electronic stage right now.
I get that.
Um,
I can take a
too much
look
bad
at your,
stuff going on with it right now.
I can take a look at your big honkin' book and
Okay.
see what that one says and if there's an indicator of it or not.
That was
Um,
it said elder, it said older man, older woman, and older ones. Those were the four things that it said on there.
That was all that it said.
That
Okay.
was it. And so I was like, I think this means elders of the church, but this is not what this is saying.
Yeah. It does refer to elders of the church in that office because that's the primary usage of it. But, yeah, we'll take a look at that book and see why it's saying it that way.
And it has the prefix "sum" in front of it, which means co.
That one's coming up.
Okay.
There are two, so he starts off, therefore I exhort you elders, That's just presbyteros. Among you as your fellow elder. That's the soon presbyteros.
Yeah, I skipped
So
that.
you're getting ahead of me. That's okay.
Sorry, I will.
So it is referring to the office, the overseer. But when Paul mentioned overseer, I said that's a different word. That one's going to come up in a little bit as episkopos. And here's where we're going down the rabbit trail. There are 3 different words that are going to be used in this section to refer to that office. How many of you have heard of bishops, elders, pastors, overseers, and I thought there was one more, but it's not coming to me right now. Oh, Presbyterians, or presbyters, there we go. The Presbyterians use the presbyter, but presbyters. You've heard of those different things? What's the difference? Scripturally versus how they're used. There are 2 different answers to the question that I just asked. Let me rephrase the question. In the modern usage, what's the difference between them?
The power of the office they're holding.
Okay, power of the office that they're holding and denomination that they're a part of.
That's what I mean by that.
Yeah. Scripturally, what's the difference?
Not much.
So is a pastor an elder?
Yes.
Is an elder an overseer? Is a pastor to oversee, to be the elder? Yes. And do what? Presbyter, yeah. So this is one where I find church history fascinating, and you can really get into a lot, but it seems Peter is letting it be known that these are not 3 different offices and positions, that they're all one. And so in order to be an elder, you need to be qualified according to 1 Timothy and to Titus. But that person is also given the responsibility of shepherding. And so I'm going to give you a couple of verses or a couple of chapters to write down to see where these words are also used. Acts chapter 20 uses both presbyteros and poimeno, which is pastor or shepherd. And so when Paul is on his way to Jerusalem, he calls the elders of Ephesus and tells them, shepherd the flock of God. And then in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and in Titus chapter 1, Paul is letting it be known that the overseers, the episkopos, or the bishops, have the responsibilities of being an elder, a presbyteros. And so those 3 passages are the other places that these are used, but Peter's the only one who puts all 3 together. And so sometimes you'll run across people who say, well, someone is a pastor and not an elder, or someone is a bishop but not a presbyter, or however they want to use these terms. The reality is they are all synonymous. That's what it all comes down to. And you want your 5-word answer? These 3 different words are the same office, the same man, governed by the same responsibilities of 1 Timothy and of Titus, and now Peter's going to let us know certain things about what they need to be doing. That was more than 5 words, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, what you said in the culture back then.
Mm-hmm.
Now here, when we use bishop or reverend, or they do have a degree of difference.
The English
In our
words
culture.
are different.
In our
Yes.
culture,
Yes.
yes. But in this culture, I agree
Yeah.
with what you said.
And so if we want to think biblically, then we shouldn't separate these into 3 different categories or 3 different groups. They are all one and the same, and a man who is a pastor is required to meet the qualifications for elder, is given the responsibility of oversight, is to shepherd those who are among them. And so all of these are being used in this in this section, I'll point them out as we get to them, but all of these are being used to refer to the people that Peter is giving this exhortation to, who, based on what I said at the start, it appears he's also linking with this idea of judgment, which means that those who are in leadership of the church bear a responsibility for how they guide that church. Yes, ma'am?
Is this similar in reference to a believer and a saint? Whereas in other religions,
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yes, good connection there. The difference between believer and saint would be the same as the difference between a presbyteros and episkopos. So, those are kind of fun words to say, I'll admit. So, what is it that he is doing? He says, I exhort you. What does that mean? Or question 1a, define exhort.
Courage.
Encourage. Okay.
Urge.
Urge.
Make an appeal.
To make an appeal.
call to one side.
The basic idea is to call to one side, which I find interesting. This is not a command. This is not a, I'm ordering you and telling you how it has to be. What Peter, just from the start, he's coming alongside them and saying, hey, you really ought to. I encourage you. The word is even translated sometimes as beg or beseech. Think Romans 12. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God. It's the idea of to comfort. It's a very gentle, though it is firm, it's a very gentle approach in which Peter, and this word is used a lot in Scripture, where even though Peter has the apostolic authority to walk in and just start telling them this is how it has to be, he doesn't do that. He comes alongside them and says, hey, I'm encouraging you, I'm begging you, you the elders, as a fellow elder, I beseech, I encourage, I exhort you to do certain things. Now, question 2, there are 3 bases, that Peter uses for this exhortation. I already gave you the first one. Actually, Jim pointed it out. A sous presbyteros, or a or fellow elder. That's the first one. What's the second one?
A witness to the sufferings for Jesus?
Okay, a witness to the sufferings of Christ. What does that mean?
That you're present.
Okay.
I guess it could be, or the knowledge now through the word as well, but.
So the word witness is actually martyr. It's where we get the term of a martyr, one who gives their life for, but it was used of a witness, someone who bore witness in a court of law. So typically it referred to an eyewitness, but can also be used of those who heard and share what they heard. So they didn't have to necessarily be there. But what was he a witness of?
Sufferings of Christ.
Why doesn't he say, I was a witness of the resurrection of Christ, or the transfiguration of Christ, or the glory of Christ, or all of these things that he could have used? He spent 3 years walking with Christ. And yet, the one thing that he points to, when he sees Jesus suffering, what is Peter doing?
Well, he's talking about judgment coming.
Denying.
Well, he is talking about judgment coming, but he's denying him. So I think that Peter is using some really cool language here, in which he is coming alongside them, and he's presenting himself as he is. He's not elevating, he's not saying, I'm an apostle, I get to tell you what to do, No, he's saying, I'm begging you, as a fellow elder, as one who kind of messed up, but who God forgave, who he brought me back, who I got to see the sufferings, because suffering has been what he's been talking about throughout this book. But the third one is pretty cool too. He uses this word partaker, which is a partner with or an associate to. But what is he a partaker of?
The glory that's to be revealed.
When is that going to happen?
Either the rapture or the second coming, whichever you,
Eventually.
yes,
It's in the future.
right.
He was a witness to the transfiguration. So he could have said, I'm a witness of, I'm a partaker of the glory that has been revealed. And yet, that's not what he does. He's pointing forward. And so I mentioned last week that verse 19 of chapter 4 is almost a summary of the whole book. It's interesting to me that he's using a lot of those same themes and ideas here, in which he's referring to the sufferings, he's addressing the fact that there's past and there's future, and he's anticipating, he's looking forward to the glory that is going to happen. And in all of this, he's putting himself alongside these men. He's not establishing himself as better. Even though he had every right and legally he could, like he had the privilege that he could have, but he doesn't. He doesn't use any of that. Instead, he comes alongside them, he encourages them to do a particular thing. And what is that in verse 2?
Exercise oversight.
Before that,
Shepherd the flock.
shepherd the flock of God among you. He is going to tell them to exercise authority. This is one of those where the form of the verb can get pretty interesting. There's a command to, or an imperative, I should say, to shepherd. And then there is a participle of how they are to shepherd. And that's the exercising authority or exercising oversight. And so the way that that's set up is that he instructs them, but this instruction, this command, is alongside. I beg you, do what God put you there to do. Shepherd the flock. The way that you shepherd the flock is by exercising oversight, and we'll get to that. I want to dig into this idea of shepherding the flock of God among you. First of all, whose flock is it? It's God's. So there's a level of humility that he's encouraging, because this isn't your flock. This is God's flock. You are a part of this, and you are given the responsibility to shepherd that flock of God that you're with. Where has Peter had this concept of shepherding brought up to him before? I'm pointing to something specific. I see a couple of smiles, but go ahead. John, chapter 21. When, after Jesus is resurrected, and I already pointed out this idea of Peter witnessing the sufferings of Christ when he's denying Christ, and yet I find it interesting. And Peter doesn't specifically say, oh, hey guys, you remember when I did all of this stuff? But it sure alludes back to, it sure looks similar to, when in John 21, Christ comes to him and says, Peter, do you love me? And if you do, take care of my sheep. And he uses three different words, and there's a lot of really cool Greek and language studies that you can do in John chapter 21. But what it boils down to is that Jesus told Peter to take care of the sheep. And now Peter is telling these elders to take care of the sheep. And it's Peter's passing the torch to the next generation. He's encouraging those who may not have been those eyewitnesses with him to see all of these things, but yet they've heard and they are aware and they do bear witness. And so he comes alongside them in verse 1 and exhorts them to continue the process of what he had started. And he gives them this responsibility to shepherd the flock of God that's among them. He then tells them how they are supposed to do that. And that's where we get to that idea of exercising oversight. That's the word comes from episkopos. And what is it to be in that position? What is it to be a episcopal, a bishop, an overseer?
To look after.
Okay, to look after, to tend, okay,
Care for.
to care for,
I thought it was interesting to inspect.
okay,
That word came up, inspect.
to inspect them,
Lead them where they need to go.
okay, to lead them. What, do what?
Caring, rule,
To rule over, okay,
no,
and
caring,
to care and rule.
yeah, caring rule is what it said.
So how is shepherding different than overseeing? Just in the words that are being used.
There's not much difference.
Do what? Shepherding is guiding, okay.
One of the words that came up for that was oversee.
Okay,
So it's somewhat the same. I would say that exercising is the verb,
okay,
where you're, it's an active word that you are responsible for caring for.
okay. What does a shepherd do? What is one of the big responsibilities?
Providing for the sheep.
Okay, providing,
Protection.
I
feed,
feel like overseer is more removed, like over looking down and making sure everything's good. But I
okay,
feel like a shepherd's like more in there, and here's your food, and here's some water, and I don't know,
okay.
more inside of it.
Yeah,
That's
protect them
that
from
careful.
harm,
Yeah, protection's part of it. Elsa?
Shepherds are taking care of sheep, so that's something that's intelligently less than them.
Okay,
Whereas overseers, they are above, they're in charge, but they're also working with something that's intellectually level.
okay. That's an interesting way of thinking about it. What you got?
Five-word answer.
Yep.
Overseer is the owner. and
Okay.
the shepherd is the one taking care of them.
Okay, so one takes care of them. The shepherd is responsible to feed, to nourish, to tend a flock or herd, whereas an overseer is to look over or be aware. I mentioned already that these three are synonyms. They're synonymous. They work together. They're referring to the same position. At the same time, I think that they are used a little bit differently in order to convey some nuance to how that person's supposed to do it. That a pastor has a leadership responsibility, an administrative responsibility that comes with this idea of exercising oversight. But that leadership and that command authority or that ownership or ability to manage is also tempered with this idea of shepherd, to tend, to care for, to be among, to feed, to nourish. All of that connecting with this idea of being an elder, which in their society referenced someone with wisdom and experience who gave wise counsel and directed and guided the people. And so all three of these are being used together in order to give a picture of what is this person supposed to do. So this is the expectation of a pastor. What are they supposed to do? Well, they're supposed to be a mature believer. They're supposed to guide and direct and oversee the church while being a caregiver, nourishing, feeding, teaching the word, preaching the word. That's the job of a pastor. And so Peter has used a bunch of different words to kind of give us an idea of what is a pastor supposed to be. What is their job description, in essence, among these various words. But now he's going to get into some specifics of that oversight. when somebody's in charge, what tends to happen? Not always among Christians, I acknowledge, but in general, they get a little puffed up, right? Like, I'm top dog. Do what? I'm the one. I'm big man. And yet, we're about to see there's 3 pairs of not this, but that. 2 of them are in verse 2, which is why question number 5 says, what 4 adverbs are used in verse 2 to describe that oversight? But then question 6 picks up the last 2 in verse 3. But notice just the way that Peter presents these, they are given in couples. Not this, but this. So, what's the first one that's listed there?
Not under compulsion.
Not under compulsion. What does that mean?
By force.
You're not forced.
Okay. Do what?
I think we.
You both said not by
We
force,
both
not
said
forced. Okay. They're not being pressured into it. They're not being forced to do it.
Compelled.
I thought of the idea, well, I mean, somebody has to do it, so I guess I will. You twisted my arm, so I'm going to. It's not like that. Instead, what is it to be?
Volunteer.
Voluntarily, willingly, right? It's a free choice. This is something, and we are not going to, I'm intentionally not going to 1 Timothy and Titus. In those, it says, if a man aspires to, there's an expression of a desire or a want to do this. And that's the idea, that an overseer, a bishop, is not to be forced into this, but to do it willingly, to have the desire to do it. And then it says, according to the will of God. So there's a few ideas of how that can be played out. Either if God wants me to be in charge, then I'm going to be. I'm willing to do it if that's what God picks. That's a good concept and rendering of it. Or I'm going to do it the way that God wants me to do it. I'm doing it according to His will. And the wording in Greek is just according to God. So it doesn't really elaborate on what it means by according to God, whether it's doing it His way or doing it because He directs it. Either one is valid, though. This idea of an elder, a shepherd, an overseer, is to do this not because they're forced to, but because they are willing to, desiring to. They have a free choice to do it, and they choose to be put in this position of authority within the church. Make sense so far? What about the second pairing?
Not for sword gain, but with eagerness.
All right. What does sword gain?
Money. Money.
Dishonest.
Greedy?
Get paid
Dishonest?
for it. Yeah, just get paid for it.
Just to get paid. Filthy lucre, if you've got the old King James.
Yep.
It's an interesting word. The idea is connected with greedy. It's interesting. There have been some people who try and use this to say that a pastor should not be paid. They should do this willingly out of a good heart, and they shouldn't be paid for it. What do you think?
Did you ask them when are you gonna sign up?
I did not.
Well, there's
Oh, go ahead.
there's plenty of verses in there that if a man worked for it, he needs to be paid.
Okay.
Right, don't muzzle the ox.
Yep.
You might happen to be referring to 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 17 and 18? Yeah. What you got, Tiff?
Peter did this in couples, so like not under compulsion, but voluntary, not for sort of gain, but for free. No, that's not what it says.
No, it does,
Like,
yeah.
in the way he contrasts it, it's not the money that's the issue.
No, but
That's a very good observation. These pairings, one was being forced to, and instead it's voluntary. The second one is sword gain, or filthy lucre, or out of greed for gain, compared with eagerness. Not compared with he does it for free or he does it at no charge. Though we do have an example in Paul when he's dealing with the Corinthians. What does he say about that? Do it? Okay, a workman is worthy of his hire.
But in that example, Paul's like, I'm not taking your money. I worked for making tents while I was there because I didn't want to.
So is Paul contradicting himself?
It was the people he was working with. And
He-
he was
he
being that
says-
example that's the next couplet.
So he says in 1 Timothy that the worker is worthy of his wages, don't muzzle the ox, those instructions and commands. Then he gives the example in 1 Corinthians. He says, I have the right and the authority to be paid, but I chose not to so that it wouldn't distract, so that it wouldn't prevent people from coming to Christ. And so, neither of them are contradictory. Neither of them are saying that a pastor is not to be paid. They are both saying that his attitude is not for the money. The 1 Timothy 5, 17 and 18. The 1 Corinthians, I did not write that one down. And it's not coming to me right now. I'm sorry. I'm sure someone with a electronic device will find it for me quickly, I hope. This idea of eagerly, what does that word mean? Eagerly.
Passion,
Okay, with passion?
but I had passion shown in advance.
Okay.
A desire to do what is right.
Desire with passion. So the first one is kind of related to free choice. I'm willing. I'll do it. Not because I have to, not because nobody else is doing it, but I'm stepping up. I'm available. I'm willing. This one is kind of even advancing that a little bit more to a level of desire, eagerness, passion, ready to do it. Like, the idea of one is sitting back and volunteering, and the other is jumping up and going to the start line, and you're ready. Both of them you could go if selected, but he's kind of building with the intensity. Tiff?
1 Corinthians 9, verses 1 to like 19, 18.
1 Corinthians chapter 9,
Yeah,
and a big chunk of the
yeah.
chapter. Yes, thank you.
I also
She
had
didn't even use an electronic device either. Go ahead.
thoroughly willing.
Okay, thoroughly willing. Yep.
I was just gonna say, excited.
Yeah.
You got somebody that's excited, they're eager to.
Yeah, that's the idea. That this person, he's not doing it because he's greedy for what do I get. He's excited about the opportunity to serve the Lord in this way. What?
I see that in the realm of whatever you do, you're doing it unto the Lord.
Do it heartily.
You
Yeah.
know, It's always looking at who you're waiting for.
Mhm.
Whether you're washing dishes, washing dishes.
So that's something to be aware of. A lot of the things where a elder is described, or a pastor, or, I use them all interchangeably, so where they're described, it's the same things that everybody else is supposed to be doing. And I'm actually getting a little ahead of myself because he says, proving to be an example of the flock. So we'll get to that. But yeah, that idea that we are to work heartily as to the Lord, well, that's everybody's instructed with that. But here, there's an eagerness, there's a desire, there's a passion, there's a intensity that is kind of building in this expectation of being a pastor. I'm still on verse 2, I can think of examples of the failure of both of these. And they're kind of the negatives, not this way. They're kind of in separate categories, like competing categories. By constraint is, I have known pastors who wanted to retire, who wanted to be done, and they just couldn't get out. There was nobody else. If not me, then who? And their preaching started to fail, and their love for the people started to fail, and they just were not as good of a pastor. I've also known of pastors who they were after it for themselves. They were greedy for, what can I get out of it? Because, pastors, they make the big bucks. Maybe not. But there is a level of prestige and honor, and there is, and I think it's interesting, these three things could very easily, and we haven't gotten to the third one yet, but could very easily fall into some sins that pastors are susceptible to. And so Peter is warning them to watch out for these pitfalls, these sins that, as a pastor, it would be really easy to have an attitude that is not godly, not helpful, that's actually drawing away, that's going to result in not helping your church, but instead putting you in line for judgment, for condemnation. We now have the third one. This starts in verse 3. What is the third couplet or pairing? Okay, not lording it over. Okay, but aren't they supposed to be overseers? What does a lord do?
That's not,
Okay, with pride versus
that's-
humility?
Lord is different than lording.
Okay, so not as a lord would be a different word than lording it.
Yes.
Okay, okay. What does this word lording mean? Okay, dominion,
Bossiness.
bossiness. Do what? Dictating. That's really the ideas that are being presented. There's a domineering, the word is often used in connection of with force. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who, in our age and society, describe it as church hurt, where pastors have abused their position of authority to tell them what to do, to force them and to dictate and demand. And yet Peter's saying, you're not lording it. That's not how you're supposed to do it. Yes, there is a level of oversight. There is an authority that goes with being a pastor, but not in that way. How's the rest of that phrase in verse 3 written then? Not lording it over who?
Those entrusted to you.
Okay. Those allotted to your charge, those you are in charge of. This is an interesting phrasing that Peter uses here. What does that idea, and I didn't ask you any questions on this, but what does that idea of allotted to your charge mean? I don't know if there's a different translation that may say it differently.
Designated, maybe?
Okay, designated?
It's that idea that they're not your flock. It's not your people.
Okay.
It's been given to you by
Okay.
someone higher.
The word comes from casting lots. Remember in the Old Testament, when they received an inheritance, it was by drawing lots or by the casting of lots. God gave to each of the tribes by lot what their area was going to be. It seems to me that Peter's drawing from that to say, don't get all uppity thinking that you're all that big and bad, you're in charge, you get to domineer. No, a higher authority puts you in this position allotted to you or, awarded. You used a word just a moment ago that I've forgotten now. But puts you in charge of this position. And so that it's not you that's all big and bad and important. God has given this to you. And you are placed in charge of them. You've inherited this charge, is kind of the idea. Instead, so that's the not, what's the but?
Proving to be examples to the flock.
Right. Proving to be examples. What is an example? Okay, a model. Anything else? A type. Okay. It's a sampler. I see some crocheting going on. Do you know, like the old style needlework samplers that were made to show and display? Like, this is what it's supposed to be. That's the word that he's using. That the elder, the one who's in charge, the person with the experience and the knowledge and who's doing all the feeding, is to have this attitude that they are showing the way. Not that they are getting all the benefits and reaping all the high praise and such, but instead that they are an example to everyone else of what they're supposed to be. We're going to get to some more, but I want to take a look at Matthew chapter 20 real quick. I've refrained from flipping too many times, but this one's pretty good. Matthew chapter 20. I say it's pretty good. I hope I got the right one. Yeah. Would someone read for us Matthew chapter 20, verses 25 through 28?
But Jesus called them to himself and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentile lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. It is not so among you, but whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you shall be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many."
So Jesus is laying out for them this expectation that you're not to put yourself in position of authority, over top, lording it over them, but instead that whoever wishes to be in first place is actually to be the servant of all. Just like the Son of Man did, which we could easily go to Philippians 2, where we see the mindset of Christ when he laid aside or emptied himself in order to serve. He humbled himself for this purpose. And so, just like Jesus sets the example for his initial disciples there in Matthew chapter 20, so also Peter is telling them, you're to set the example for the flock, not by being, in big, bad, and in charge, but instead leading in the way that Christ led, following the example that Jesus had. That's an interesting one that Paul does several times. Paul refers to, or in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1, Paul tells them, follow me as I follow Christ. And so as a pastor, as a leader in the church, the expectation is that you're following Jesus and you're showing the way for everybody else to do the same thing. That's the goal. That's the idea. And so Peter outlines these three different pairings of not like this, but instead like that. We then get to verse 4. And what does he say is going to appear? Or who?
Chief Shepherd,
Chief shepherd.
capital S.
This is an interesting one. Tiffany's already pointed out a couple of times the fact that this flock is not yours, that you're not the top dog. And this word for chief shepherd kind of emphasizes that. This was a kind of a common word that was used in their society when a flock was large enough that it had to have multiple caretakers, multiple shepherds on it, there would be one person who was in charge. We have the same thing in our society. You've got your workers, your middle management, and then your senior management. I mean, there's a hierarchical structure that takes place. And well, this one is the CEO, the top dog. When that person appears, then you give an accounting for what's been done. That's Isaac's summary of it. When the chief shepherd appears, that word appears is also an interesting one because it's made visible. Where is Christ right now? Well, he's everywhere, but he's also seated at the right hand of the Father, right? So he is omnipresent, but we don't see him. He is in charge, and he is currently the chief shepherd, but he's not here right now. And so this picture that Peter is using, I think is intentional to remind them that they are under shepherds and that they will be giving an account for how they have shepherded the flock. And so all of that is put together in such a way to kind of warn them and teach them what the right attitude is to be, not doing this, but instead doing it this way, so that they will be the kind of leaders that they ought to be. But recall, he started off verse 1 by coming alongside of them. And so he's already been modeling it to them, just in the way that he writes this, to say, as a fellow elder, as one who has not always done it right myself, as one who has been forgiven by Christ, who's seen all of these things, I'm encouraging you, I'm begging you, do things the way that Christ wants them done. Because he's the one who's put you in that position. He's given you that responsibility. And so don't do it in order to don't do it because you're being forced. Don't do it in order to gain, financial, be greedy. Don't do it so that you can subjugate and domineer over others. Instead, do it voluntarily. Do it willingly. Do it eagerly and readily. Do it as an example for the flock. And so Peter has outlined for them this expectation. Then how does verse 4 end? What will they receive?
The unfading crown of glory.
The unfading crown of glory. What does unfading mean?
It never disappears.
It doesn't fade. It's everlasting. It doesn't get tarnished. This is an interesting word that you can dig into a little bit if you want. It's used of a particular flower. It'd be kind of like referring to an evergreen, that it doesn't shed its leaves, it doesn't change. It was a particular flower that they had that was red and just always stayed red year round. And it was a beautiful flower, apparently. I don't know. I don't see red well. But now, what about crown? What is that?
It's a Stephanos.
Okay.
It's a wreath,
A wreath.
like during the Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
the Greek Olympics.
So if you recall, when Jack taught through Revelation, there are two different kinds of crowns. There's a ruler's crown, and which is referred to as a diadem, and then there's a Stephanos, or a victor's crown. And this is in reference to like when they had the Olympics. When they won, they were awarded a wreath that showed them as being victorious. Or if you've seen like some of the Roman pictures, the wreath crowns for conquest in battle, the great service to the king, those would all be awarded this type of a prize. It's a reward. It's something that's given to those who have earned it. And that's what Peter's saying. You get to earn this. You get to show yourself as a great servant, a wonderful warrior in battle. You get to be not the one who's in charge with the diadem crown, but instead the one who is awarded this prize. This is similar to another crown that's mentioned in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 25, and I do want to go ahead and go there. 1 Corinthians 9:25. Back up to verse 24. Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win. And everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, crown, that's the idea here, but we an imperishable. Therefore, I run in such a way as not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air. But I buffet my body and make it my slave, lest possibly, after I've preached to others, I myself should be disqualified. So in this verse 25, Paul is referencing that same idea that we seek to earn a award, a prize, a reward from the master of the games. Here we see that these elders will be awarded this unfading crown of glory, that they will get a prize if they have served well, if they have earned it. Now, is that the reason that they should be a pastor? Because they're going after the prize?
No.
No. We've already looked at this attitude of what a pastor is supposed to be and how they're supposed to do it. But just because there's a prize doesn't mean, just because there's a prize doesn't mean that they're doing it just for the prize. But it also doesn't mean that they can't seek to earn that prize. And so he's letting them know there will be a result. But when is that? At the end? When the chief shepherd appears, right? So he's not promising pastors health, wealth, and prosperity. He's not promising them their own jet and their own Bentley and their own, whatever the physical rewards that a lot of pastors who are after that greedy, filthy lucre or sordid gain. It's not that they're going to receive. It's actually something so much better, because the chief shepherd, Christ himself, will ultimately appear and give them the reward that they have earned. So this is a really neat, really interesting section in which Peter is dealing with both a warning and an encouragement, coupling them together as be on the lookout, because you don't want to do this wrong, but also it's worth it. It's a good thing. There's a reward at the end, eventually, even if it may not look like it now. Because, bear in mind the context of what he's been dealing with, these churches are getting ready to go through some persecution. He's been dealing with suffering for Christ. Who's the first one that gets targeted for that? Well, the leadership, the elders. And yet, how are they going to handle that? How are they going to guide through that? Well, they are expected to be an example to the flock. And so if Peter is letting them know that suffering is coming, and they also are prepared for it, then they will be better capable of leading their flock through whatever persecution might come their way. And ultimately, it's worth it. Now, I want to catch verse 5, because we're almost there. Verse 5. Who's this one talking to?
Younger men.
Okay?
And all of you.
And all of you. So, interestingly enough, the way that this is written, there could be a verse break right between it. So halfway down this one, that would then start the next paragraph. And so I think, based on time and that fact, we're going to save the "and all of you, clothe yourself with humility toward one another, for God is opposed to the proud but gives grace to the humble," until next week. But I do want to take a look at this. You younger men, likewise, be subject to your elders. So the ones being addressed in that are younger men. This one is kind of like that word presbyteros that we looked at previously in reverse. So that one's elder, this one is younger. And it can be a generic anybody, those of you who are younger, and how they are to relate to those who are older. But given the context and the fact that he's just been dealing with this office of elders, I think that it is accurate and very fitting that this is limited to younger men, with the idea and mindset that as they are learning and growing and preparing, if they are looking towards those elders as examples to the flock, then they might be thinking to themselves, ooh, I could be that someday. I might become a pastor eventually. Well, what's their attitude supposed to be like? How should they go about doing this? This is one where I have seen more than I would like to, young men who think, oh, I can become a pastor. I'm qualified. I'm ready. I'm going. Let's jump right in. And the reality is they don't meet 1 Timothy 3. They don't meet Titus 1. They don't have the experience or the preparation. And so how are they supposed to, if they're still a young man, what are they supposed to do? Be subject. What does it mean to be subject?
To submit.
Okay. To willingly submit. To place themselves under.
Under obedience.
The one of the ways that I kind of wrote this in my own words is, you younger men support the efforts of the elders. Like the ones who aren't elders, come alongside, build them up, help them out. Not to take that position yet, but to support it. Because that's what submitting is, or subjecting is. It's voluntarily putting yourself under to assist, to elevate, to help, to build. And so this exhortation that he gives in 1 Peter chapter 5 starts off with the elders. It's quite long and there's a lot going on there. But then this first half of verse 5 seems to be focused on those who are younger in that same way. That's what the likewise is about. Connected with what we just got done talking about, here's your role. Maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're not trained up. Maybe you're not an elder yet. But that doesn't mean that you don't also have a job. As a young man, submit to the elders that are there and still be building up the church. Still be getting it to where it ought to be. Still be prepared for the suffering that is coming. So Peter is, like I said, beginning to draw this book kind of to a close. He's bringing up some of these final exhortations that he wants them to be aware of. And he's about to shift. Like I said, the verse 5 could be broken in the middle. The verses are not inspired. And so you could easily break it there and have a new verse that'll connect with the next section. But Peter is kind of giving some so what. And his first information is going to be directed towards the men of the church and how they ought to function. The elders are to lead in a particular way. The youngers are to submit to that authority and to really still be helping build the church. I saw a hand. Go ahead.
In light of this passage, I guess I see it kind of affirming the concept that 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 are actually not qualifications, but attributes that all men should aspire to, whether they're going for the office of elder or not. They are godly attributes worthy of a mature believer.
I think that that's definitely true. That whether somebody is put into that position, that office, is irrelevant to the character expectations of believers.
Right.
Now, that's not to say that Paul in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 is not giving specific requirements. He is.
Right.
He's saying, if you are an elder, you have to be this. But the reality is that all believers should aspire to meet those things that are listed. And that the elders, a big chunk of their job is to display that and to prove that example, to show it. I missed it as we went through, but that word proving is ginomai, which is to become. And so there is a level at which they are putting on display and showing themselves to be while also becoming more. It's like they're already up here, but that doesn't mean that they're done. They can still keep going. And so the idea is that they are to draw along the younger ones as they, well, just like what Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. That's what a good pastor is supposed to do. That's what a good pastor is expected to do. And that's what Peter is exhorting these elders that he connects himself with and says, as a fellow elder, as one who is right in the trenches right beside you, here's what we need to do. Let's do it well. And even though it may include suffering in this life, Christ has promised a great reward if we're faithful to him. That's true for the elders, for the pastors. That's also true in other passages for everybody. We're all expected to do that. So, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the high calling of serving you. Lord, help us to take seriously the responsibilities that you have given, and help us to do well in what you call us to. Lord, each of us has a job and a responsibility. Help us to be faithful and good servants, good stewards of all that you've entrusted to us, knowing that ultimately you will judge rightly and reward appropriately. So Lord, help us not to keep our focus here on this earth and the results in the short term, but instead to look to you, to trust you, to lean on you for the strength to do what you've called us to do. In Jesus' name, amen. Almost made it through part 16.